What happens when one of Hollywood's most outspoken legends sits down with daytime television's most controversial panel? The encounter between Samuel L. Jackson and The View host quickly turned into one of the show's most explosive confrontations ever. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a clear example of how fast things can spiral when egos clash and boundaries are crossed. Before we dive into the story, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment, because you won't believe what happened. Last night's episode, intended as a routine promotional appearance, left the studio in chaos. From the moment Samuel L. Jackson stepped onto the set, tension was palpable. The veteran actor, known for his no-nonsense attitude and fierce independence, took his seat with quiet intensity that made everyone hold their breath. The hosts, seemingly unaware of the brewing storm, launched into their usual routine with their trademark smugness. Joy Behar opened with what she likely thought was a harmless question about Jackson's latest project, but her tone carried a subtle condescension. "Samuel, we're so excited to have you promoting your new action movie. At your age, don't you think it's time to slow down and take on more age-appropriate roles?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Jackson's eyes narrowed slightly, but he stayed composed. Age-appropriate? What exactly does that mean, Joy? Are you saying I'm too old to do my job? Whoopi Goldberg tried to smooth things over with her usual diplomacy, but even she couldn't mask the patronizing undertone. "What Joy means is we worry about you doing all those stunts. We care about your well-being." "My well-being," Jackson replied, his familiar edge cutting through. "I've been doing this for over 4 decades. I think I know how to handle my own career." But it was Sunny host who escalated the situation. Leaning forward with a self-satisfied expression, she said, "Samuel, don't you think there's a responsibility that comes with your platform? Your movies are violent. With everything happening in society today, shouldn't celebrities be more conscious of the content they produce?" The studio fell silent. Even camera operators sensed the shift. Jackson's jaw tightened as he processed not just the question, but the implications. This wasn't about his career alone, it was about artistic freedom and personal responsibility. "Let me get this straight," he said, voice calm but firm. "You're telling me I'm responsible for violence in society because I play fictional characters in movies?" Sarah Haynes tried to redirect the conversation. "We're not saying you're responsible, Samuel. We're just asking if you consider the impact of your work on impressionable viewers." Impressionable viewers. Jackson's laugh was sharp. "You mean adults who can tell the difference between entertainment and reality? Or parents who should monitor what their kids watch instead of expecting Hollywood to raise them?" The hosts exchanged surprised glances. They were used to celebrities who nodded politely or offered a diplomatic non-answer. But Jackson wasn't playing that game. Alyssa Farrah Griffin, the newest panelist, tried a different approach. "Samuel, we're just saying that in today's climate, with all the gun violence and social unrest, shouldn't entertainment be more responsible, more uplifting? You want me to make movies about rainbows and unicorns?" Jackson's voice rose slightly. "Is that what you think my job is?" Joy Behar, irritated that her question had sparked the confrontation, doubled down. "There's no need to be defensive. We're just discussing social responsibility." "Defensive?" Jackson's eyes flashed. "I'm not being defensive. I'm being real. You invited me to talk about my work, and instead, you're lecturing me on how to live my life and conduct my career. That's not a conversation. That's a sermon." The atmosphere in the studio had shifted completely. A routine interview was now an intense confrontation. The hosts were unprepared for Jackson's resistance, and he was just getting started. Whoopi tried again. "Samuel, we respect your work and your right to choose projects, but surely you understand our concerns about the messages being sent to young people." Jackson leaned back, incredulous. "Who appointed you the moral guardians of America? You sit here every day discussing politics, stirring controversy. And now you want to lecture me about sending the wrong message? The accusation hit hard. These were women who built careers on speaking out and taking controversial positions, but suddenly they were challenged by someone unwilling to be intimidated. Soon the host sharpened her tone. Samuel, we're discussing real issues affecting real people. You're glorifying violence for entertainment. Glorifying violence. Jackson's voice was rising. The cameras captured every moment of the unfolding confrontation. I'm telling stories. I'm portraying characters. If you can't tell the difference between fiction and reality, that's not my problem, it's yours. The tension in the studio was reaching a breaking point. This was no longer a simple disagreement. It had become a clash of worldviews, and neither side was backing down. The hosts had clearly expected a compliant celebrity guest, but they had gravely underestimated who they were dealing with. Then Ana Navarro, unusually quiet until now, stepped into the fray with a comment that ignited the powder keg. Samuel, maybe it's time to evolve beyond these primitive action roles. Don't you want to leave behind a more sophisticated legacy? The word primitive hung in the air like a slap. Jackson's demeanor shifted instantly. His eyes went cold, and his voice dropped to a dangerous quiet that made everyone lean forward. Primitive, he repeated slowly, each syllable dripping with controlled fury. Did you just call my work primitive? Ana, seemingly unaware of the storm she had triggered, pressed on. I mean the constant gunplay, the aggressive characters, the angry black man stereotype. Surely you see that's not exactly progressive storytelling. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the audience went completely still. Jackson stared at her with a gaze that could melt steel. The angry black man stereotype, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet more menacing than a shout. That's what you think I am. That's what you think my career represents. Joy Behar, realizing Ana may have crossed the line, tried to intervene. Samuel, I don't think Ana meant it that way. No. Jackson cut her off, holding up a hand. Let her finish. I want to hear exactly what she means. Please, Ana, tell me more about these stereotypes I'm supposedly perpetuating. Kana, visibly uncomfortable, but unwilling to back down, doubled down. I'm just saying that in today's cultural climate, there are opportunities to show different facets of the black experience that don't involve violence and anger. Different facets of the black experience, Jackson repeated, voice growing stronger and sharper with each word. And you get to decide what those facets should be. You're going to sit there and tell me how to be black in Hollywood. The confrontation had moved far beyond artistic differences. This was personal, and everyone felt it. The hosts were clearly out of their depth, yet, instead of stepping back, they dug deeper. Whoopi tried again. Samuel, we're just trying to have a meaningful conversation about representation. Representation. Jackson's laugh was bitter. You want to talk about representation? Let's talk. I've been in this business longer than some of you have been alive. I've worked with directors of every color. I've played characters across the spectrum of human experience, and I've earned every role I've gotten. And you want to reduce it all to a stereotype? Sunny host, feeling defensive, fired back. No one's reducing your career, Samuel. We're just saying that with great power comes great responsibility. Jackson cut in, voice rising sharply. You're quoting Spider-Man at me now? Are you serious? You think I don't understand responsibility? You think I don't know what my success means or what it represents? The studio buzzed with tension. This was no longer a disagreement. It was a full-scale battle, and Jackson dominated every exchange. The hosts, used to asking the tough questions, now found themselves completely outmatched. Sarah Haynes made a final attempt. Samuel, we didn't mean to upset you. We just think entertainment should focus on bringing people together rather than what? Jackson's voice boomed like thunder. Rather than telling honest stories about real people. rather than showing the full range of human emotion and experience. You want everything sanitized and safe and comfortable for your suburban audience. That's not what we're saying, Joy protested, voice lacking conviction. That's exactly what you're saying, Jackson shot back. You want me to be your acceptable version of a black actor. Smile, nod, and make movies that won't make anyone uncomfortable. I didn't get where I am by being comfortable, and I sure as hell didn't get here by letting people like you tell me how to do my job. Anna, still smarting from his response, tried once more. We're not telling you how to do your job, Samuel. We're just asking you to consider the impact of your choices on the community. The community. Jackson's eyes flashed with fury. What community is that, Anna? Are you speaking for my community now? Did they elect you as their representative while I wasn't paying attention? Jackson's words hit like a physical blow. Anna's face flushed red, and for the first time in the confrontation, she seemed genuinely speechless. The other hosts exchanged glances, realizing they had pushed too far and that there was no graceful escape. Whoopi made one last attempt to regain control. Samuel, I think we've gotten off track. This wasn't meant to be adversarial. Jackson leaned forward, voice deadly serious. Oh, but it is adversarial, Whoopi. It became adversarial the moment you all decided you knew better than I do about my career, my choices, and my identity. You invited me here to promote my work, and instead, you turned it into an intervention. The word intervention hung in the air like an accusation, and that's exactly how it felt. A group of people convinced they knew what was best for someone else. Jackson's voice built to a crescendo. An intervention. You get to play therapist, and I'm supposed to be the patient who needs fixing. Well, I've got news for you. I don't need fixing. I don't need your approval, and I sure as hell don't need your permission to be who I am. Studio knew the confrontation had peaked. This was no longer about movies, social responsibility, or artistic choices. It was about respect, dignity, and the right to exist without justification to people, who had already decided who you should be. Then came the moment that would be replayed endlessly. The moment defining the relationship between celebrity and media accountability. Joy Behar, frustrated, tried to regain authority through condescension. Samuel, you're being very emotional. Maybe we should take a breath and approach this rationally. The word emotional was gasoline on a fire. Jackson went stone cold. His voice carried a quiet menace that made everyone lean back instinctively. Emotional, he said, each syllable rolling like a curse. Did you just call me emotional for standing up for myself? For refusing to let you disrespect me on national television? Joy realized her mistake, but it was too late. I didn't mean no. Jackson cut her off. You meant exactly what you said. You think that because I'm not sitting here like a good little guest, nodding along while you lecture me, that makes me emotional. You think that because I push back against your condescending questions, I'm irrational. The studio was silent, except for the hum of cameras capturing this unprecedented meltdown. The audience was transfixed. Sun Nanny host, seemingly deciding it couldn't get worse, made it worse. Samuel, we're not your enemies. We're just trying to have an honest conversation about accountability in the entertainment industry. Accountability. Jackson's voice rose, making the microphones crackle. You want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about yours. When was the last time any of you were held accountable for what you say on this show? When was the last time you faced consequences for your opinions? The hosts exchanged nervous glances. We're held accountable every day, Whoopi said, defensively. We face criticism, pushback. Jackson interrupted, laughing with no humor. You sit in your protected little bubble, surrounded by people who agree with you, and call that accountability. You've never had to worry whether your opinions would cost you work. You've never had to choose between speaking your mind and paying your bills. Anna Navarro tried to interrupt. That's not fair, Samuel. We've all worked hard. Hard work. Jackson's incredulity was palpable. You think sitting at this table, reading from teleprompters, giving hot takes on current events, is hard work? You think that compares to building a career in this industry? The contempt in his voice hit its mark. These hosts, priding themselves on intelligence and insight, were being dismantled systematically by someone who had finally had enough. Sarah Haynes made one last attempt. Samuel, we respect your achievements. We're just trying to understand your perspective on these issues. My perspective. Jackson stood, towering over the set. My perspective is that I don't need to justify my life's work to a panel who's never walked in my shoes, never faced my challenges, never had to prove themselves the way I have. Standing sent a clear message. The interview was over, whether the hosts liked it or not. But Jackson wasn't finished. You want to know what I think is irresponsible? His voice cut through the silence. Inviting someone on your show and spending the entire time trying to tear them down, pretending you're having a conversation when it's really an ambush. Joy Behar, perhaps realizing their guest was preparing to leave, made one final attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. Samuel, please sit down. We can discuss this like adults. Jackson's response was swift and final. Like adults? You mean the adults you've been for the past 20 minutes, questioning my intelligence, my choices, my integrity, my identity? Those kinds of adults. The sarcasm landed like a hammer, and it was clear to everyone that the host had completely lost control. You know the real problem here? Jackson continued, his voice carrying decades of experience and frustration. The real problem is that you can't handle someone who won't bow down to your authority. You're used to celebrities who come on, smile, and nod, give you the sound bites you want. But I'm not one of those people. Whoopi tried one last time to maintain some semblance of dignity. Samuel, we never expected you to bow down. You thought wrong. Jackson interrupted. You thought you could lecture me about my career, my choices, my impact on society, and I would just sit here and take it. You thought you could reduce 40 years of work to some stereotype, and I would thank you for the privilege. The studio crackled with tension. This was no longer a failed interview, it was a complete breakdown of the traditional celebrity media dynamic, and everyone knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. Jackson reached for the small microphone clipped to his shirt and calmly removed it. The gesture, gentle yet deliberate, was more dramatic than any act of anger. I came here to talk about my work, to connect with an audience, to share something meaningful. Instead, I got a lecture from people who think they know better than I do about my own life. He placed the microphone on the table. The soft click sounded deafening in the silent studio. You want to know what's really irresponsible? He said, his voice carrying a finality that made everyone hold their breath. What's irresponsible is wasting people's time with this kind of amateur hour journalism. What's irresponsible is pretending to be journalists when what you really are is a group of people with opinions and a platform. With that, Jackson turned and walked toward the exit, each step confident and purposeful. The cameras followed, capturing every movement of what would become one of the most talked about moments in talk show history. As he reached the edge of the set, he paused and turned back one last time. And for the record, he said, voice carrying clearly across the stunned studio, I'm not emotional. I'm disgusted. The studio door closed behind him with a soft thud that somehow sounded like a thunderclap. The hosts sat frozen, expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment to something approaching fear. The audience was silent, processing what they had just witnessed. The cameras kept rolling, documenting the aftermath of the most explosive confrontation in the show's history. No one knew what to say or how to proceed. What had been intended as a routine promotional appearance had become a masterclass in how quickly things can spiral out of control when respect is absent and assumptions are made. In the quiet that followed, the empty chair where Jackson had sat served as a powerful symbol of what had just transpired. Everyone in that studio knew they had witnessed a moment that would be remembered for years. The View would continue. But this confrontation, the day Samuel L. Jackson walked off their set, would define how people remembered it. A collision of power, respect, and unflinching honesty.